Right, it's about time we started to put some enemies on the scene, but before we do that, we just want to look at the models, because we need to detect collisions now. So we've got two models here. There's my ship and there's the enemy ship. Let's look at my ship first. So here in the model section, we've got this option to generate colliders. So I'm going to turn that on and apply the settings. Right, that's been applied. So if I look at my ship model now, just home in on it, we can see that we've got colliders on the ship. There's the green marks there. Now I want to have a look at those colliders. So looking at my ship, we've got this option of having the colliders convex, or put those back on. Right, so if I turn off the mesh renderer, we can see the colliders. Right, that's the collider for the main body of the ship. Now, the trouble with mesh colliders is that there are a lot of points here. They're very accurate, but it takes a lot of processing to look at every point here to see if any other object is entered inside the mesh. So it is much simpler to turn it into a convex one. As you can see, the mesh is a lot simpler now. And this also has the benefit of allowing collisions. Check that one. Right. And I'll turn on the mesh renderer again. We also see the mesh collider there. And what we need to do now is add a rigid body to this object. So now, of course, we're not going to use gravity here because there is no gravity up in space. I'm going to give a mass to this of something like 500. Right, so now this has a physical presence in our universe and things can interact with it physically. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to create an enemy. So again, I'm going to create an empty object first. I'm going to call this enemy. And I'll reset the transform. Just going to put it right over our ship, but never mind, I'll just hide the ship for the moment. So I'll just tag it off. Right, now I'm going to put an enemy ship inside as a child of this, so I'm going to drag it on. And now the enemy ship appears. Now it's important that its position relative to its parent is 0, 0. This minus 90 degrees is simply because I created it in Blender, so it's changed it. But the important point is, if we zoom in a bit, right, the blue axis, the forward axis, the Z axis, is in front of the ship. Now if we'd put it on directly, then the Z axis would be pointing up, and that would mess everything up altogether. Now I could add some mesh collider here, but it is going to be very complicated. So what I'm going to do is go back to the enemy. I'm going to add a component, a rigid body, again no gravity. I'll make this 500 as well. And instead of adding a mesh component, I'm going to add a number of simple meshes, simple colliders here. So the obvious thing that is going to be, just get a better view of it here. In fact, I think I'll just go around to the front. There we are. I'll add a component, physics, and I'm going to add a sphere collider here. and click on the edit. I'm just going to stretch it out to cover that central part. Yep. Now I've got some edges here, and I'll add some box colliders to that. Right, I did that. And looking at the side, I'll just stretch it out to cover half that, I think. Now, it's not an exact fit, but it's pretty close. It's good enough for this. And another collider there, box collider again. And I'll bring this one over here. And again at the side. Now this section in the middle is not covered by a collider. I could put a capsule collider in there. Also the engine is not covered, but as this is going to be moving forward, these are the main areas that we're going to attack. So those three colliders together will help the ship to survive. Right, turn on my ship again. And I'm going to look at it from the top. And I'm going to move the enemy, not the enemy ship, but the enemy, away from our ship. So I'm going to move it fairly off into the distance. Right. So let me set it about 80. Right, what we want this enemy to do is to lock on to our ship and approach it. So we're going to do that through code. Right, so a new script. I'm going to call this enemy control. Right, so here's our enemy control. Let's edit that. Now, what we want to do is have a public float to determine its speed. I'm going to give it an initial value of something like 6. It might be right, it might not be right. Now I want it to lock onto our ship, which is called Defendant. Defender, that's it. So it's a game object. I'm going to call it target, because this is the enemy's target. In start, I'm going to locate this target. I'm doing it this way instead of as a public, because this is eventually going to end up as a prefab, so it'll need to work on its own. Okay, so I'll say target game object dot find. Okay, and our object is the destroyer. There's defender. Defender, not destroyer. Yep. Right. So we're going to find that game object. Right, so we want this to lock onto our ship. So we've used it before, the look at, and what we're going to look at is the target dot. So that's our ship. So it's going to look at our ship. But more importantly, that means it's going to lock its z-axis in the direction of the ship. So now it has to move forward. So I'm going to create a new vector 3. I'm going to call it displacement. And that's going to be based on the vector 3 dot forward. Okay. So that's just in the z direction. That's 0, 0, 1. And I'm going to multiply that by speed, and I'm going to scale it by time dot delta time. And I'm just going to move the ship in that direction. So I'm going to say transform I'm going to use the translate, and I'm going to put displacement in there. Okay, so that's our basic code. So let's just check it out. Okay, that's fine. And if we go back to our game, there's our enemy ship. Let's see what happens now. So it's heading for us. I can try evasive action, but it's still locked onto me. And eventually we're going to collide and engage in some sort of ritual mating dance here. We can't have any of that, can we? Okay, so we're going to do a bit more next time.